Assalamu alaikum. Today we will discuss the security situation in Pakistan with Mr. Khalid Mohammed, who is an independent security analyst and Director General at Command 11. Command 11 is a think tank that specializes in research on counterterrorism, insurgency, and extremism. Mr. Khalid has in-depth knowledge on terrorism, geopolitics, fifth generation warfare, and terrorist groups operating in the Middle East and in the Indian subcontinent. He's also a best-selling novelist. His debut espionage thriller, Agency Rules, has been a breakthrough bestseller around the world. I also wrote a review of his novel, which you can find on my timeline today. Welcome, Khalid, and thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. I would like to start by giving a few stats about recent terrorist activities in Pakistan and the losses suffered by our security forces. On 15 September, 7 Pakistani soldiers and 5 terrorists were martyred in a gun battle in South Waziristan. And on 30th August, again in South Waziristan, a Pakistani soldier was martyred when an improvised explosive device went off. Then on 27th August, a Pakistan army soldier was martyred after terrorists fired on a military post from inside Afghanistan in Lower Deed district. On 23rd August, a Pakistan army captain was martyred, while 2 soldiers were injured after their vehicle was targeted with an improvised explosive device in Balochistan. Khalid, we see that there has been a noticeable uptick in terror attacks targeting security forces in the past few months. And on August 18th, a soldier embraced martyrdom during a standoff with terrorists. Again, it was in South Waziristan. According to ISPR, Pakistan has consistently been asking Afghanistan to ensure effective border control on their side. But we see that terror activities in tribal districts near Afghan border have intensified, and there has been a rise in violence after the Taliban took over. So how do you see the situation?
I think you missed one attack. 2 days ago in Mardan, a police officer was martyred by a TTP, an assassin.
Right.
So we need to add that one in as well. I think we need to look at this from a couple of different points of view. First of all, the takeover in Afghanistan has definitely emboldened the TTP. It's emboldened the Islamic State, Khorasan. But what we have to understand is the capabilities compared between the Taliban, ISIS KP, and the TTP are significantly different. What you're seeing right now are what are considered low-impact attacks. Things that will cause a lot of fear, things that will cause a lot of concern, but there's not a spectacular attack that we can say that the TTP is actually back. One of the things you have to remember is that we have a government in Pakistan that, whether we want to admit it or not, is very pro-Taliban. From Imran Khan's statement yesterday coming back from Dushabi, where he said he has told the Taliban that they need to form an inclusive government, you're giving the world an opinion that, or an impression that Pakistan's government, Pakistan's intelligence services, Pakistan's armed forces have some kind of sway, some kind of influence on the Taliban. Now, understanding all of this as being the picture painted, not only us, but the US, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, India, Turkey, Iran, everyone has asked that Afghanistan assure that their soil will not be used for terrorist activities. And thus far, all of the Taliban's spokespeople have repeatedly guaranteed that they will not allow for that to happen. What we're seeing right now is what is considered a switch over. Before the Taliban were all fighting one enemy, and that was the United States. Now the US is gone. Now the TTP has pledged their allegiance, but not pledged their allegiance. ISIS KP says we refuse to accept the Taliban. We will fight with them. And then you have other splinter groups around the sides that are going to create this disharmony, not only in Afghanistan, but in Pakistan as well. Now, to be very honest, you also have to look at what's going on with our media here. Someone on the caliber of Mohsen Dawar writing articles talking about how Pakistan's security state has been involved with bringing the Taliban into power, that our DCISI went to Afghanistan and main structure of the government that was supposed to be announced, these things don't help our cause. While the army is successful in wiping out terrorism in Pakistan, and we have to be very, very honest about that. We are the only country in the world that has literally wiped out terrorism on our soil. No other country can make that claim to fame. But the other thing we have to understand is that we will have many people, many intelligence agencies, many foreign governments trying to cause instability inside of Pakistan to create two things. One, a reason to re-invade Afghanistan, and number two, to actually go after the real target, which is Pakistan. So I think, and we've said this over our Twitter platform a number of times, that the next 6 to 8 months for Pakistan will be diplomatically challenging, militarily challenging, economically challenging, and politically challenging. Because with all four of these things in play, they are going to pressure Pakistan from every way they possibly can. Much like how New Zealand left Pakistan the other day, just hours before the match was supposed to start. From our understanding, there were even videos posted by the New Zealand players that said everything is fantastic in Pakistan, we're looking forward to play, and all of a sudden there was a threat. We have to be very, very careful to listen and watch and understand where domestic threats are coming from, where international threats are coming from, what are advisories, what are actual threat reports, what are actual threat advisories, and start to operate within that point of view. We have a habit here in Pakistan when it comes to the war on terror of shooting ourselves in the foot. Whatever successful accomplishment we achieve, we are very good at beating that one into the ground just within days of achieving that success. So there's a lot of things in play, and I think we're going to have a very long conversation because there are so many different things to talk about outside of just the Taliban and the TTP update. Because the TTP is going to focus now on aligning with other non-state actors to cause problems in Balochistan, to cause problems in the Fatah region of KPK, to cause problems inside the settled districts of KPK, because they'll be looking for a place where they can give a good shot that will bring international media that will discredit Pakistan and prove the narrative that the world is trying to paint about us.
Right. You are saying that people like Mohsen Dawa are not helping a cause because the role Pakistan has been playing and is playing in reality and in people's imagination regarding Taliban, that has to be made clear. And people can get confused about it, especially when the Prime Minister of our country is tweeting that he's initiating a dialogue with the Taliban so that they may form an all-inclusive government. How do you see that tweet of our Prime Minister regarding Taliban?
Command 11 responded to that tweet. It's a slap in Pakistan's face. On one side, we are presenting the platform that the Taliban is an independent government. We will work with them. We will help them bring stability in Afghanistan, but we have no control over them. And then when our Prime Minister comes back from Dushanbe, from meeting the Shanghai Cooperation, comes back and says, listen, I have made a decision that I am going to talk to the Taliban about forming an inclusive government. Now, to be very honest, the Taliban, their spokespeople, what we have to understand is that when Imran Khan makes a statement, he is not speaking as Imran Khan anymore. He is no longer an individual speaking from his own opinion. He speaks as the Prime Minister of Pakistan, representing the state of Pakistan, the security apparatus of Pakistan, the government of Pakistan, all of our ambassadors around the world. So when Imran Khan makes a statement saying that I have decided to initiate a conversation with the Taliban and to now bring them to the table and talk about an inclusive government, you are literally saying that Pakistan has put the Taliban government in power in Afghanistan. And that's not a label that we can accept, because if tomorrow the Taliban has some problems, because we know they will have problems, if the Taliban goes back to their former Sharia form of justice, then it will be Pakistan getting the black eye again in the international community, saying, look, you created them, you claim you can control them, and now you can't control them. So Imran, as Prime Minister, has put Pakistan in a very bad position. Imran, as an individual, has put his opinion out in the market. What someone needs to explain to our Prime Minister is that when you speak, you are talking for the nation. You are not talking for yourself anymore. So he has kind of boxed us in. hopefully Moeed will be able to find a way as National Security Advisor to back us out of this and find a way to make this argument a little bit more palatable to our Western audiences, because the West is going to go nuts over this. Look, we've been saying that the ISI put the Taliban in power. We've been saying Taliban, and Imran Khan just admitted to it. So we need to be very careful with the statements that come out of government functionaries, because they speak for the nation. They do not speak for themselves anymore. So yes, we are a little bit handicapped with the government we have in power right now. But as I said in my intro, Imran Khan has always had a soft corner. He has always been in favor of negotiating with the terrorists. He has always been in favor of giving them amnesties and giving them certain concessions for the hope or the possibility that we could find peace in Pakistan. And every time that we have given the TTP a peace deal, we have found ourselves in much, much graver problems than we were before.
Right. I want to talk about the New Zealand cricket team. You know, it was their first tour to Pakistan in 18 years, but it was abandoned following a government security alert. And according to some media reports, it's Five Eyes, an intelligence alliance of Australia, Canada, New Zealand, UK, and the US, and which is reported to have given information to Cricket New Zealand regarding security threats. Do you think these threats were related to the report published in Indian media last month, where TTP had threatened to attack New Zealand's cricket team? And do you think this threat was real, or maybe it was blown out of proportion?
I don't think so. To be very honest, there was an article back in August in the Sunday Guardian Live. That publication has ties directly to the Center for Global Terrorism, I believe it's called, which is controlled directly by former RAW operatives. It's very interesting that an article published in the end of August talking about the potential of a security problem for the New Zealand cricket team in Pakistan all of a sudden came to life hours before a match, after New Zealand's own security advisors came, checked the stadium, checked the hotel, checked the route, were very satisfied with security arrangements. They all of a sudden decide, no, we cannot play cricket in Pakistan and we're going to move. If you're basing that on the government of Punjab's police advisory, those are regular reports. There's a report like that issued every day from every IT's office around Pakistan. That does not mean that there is a threat imminent. An imminent threat will be identified by the National Counter-Terrorism Authority. That will not come out to the police department. Now, the argument that a lot of people are making is that this was Five Eyes passing this to New Zealand, saying that, you should not play cricket in Pakistan. But we also need to remember that hours beforehand, Australia announced that they were buying the JF-17 fighter plane from Pakistan. And within hours of that, New Zealand said, we're not going to play cricket. There are a lot of factors at play here. Yes, the Guardian Live has this argument. Five Eyes did play their role. Yes, we did understand that Pakistan has seen an uptick in terrorist attacks, but there have been nothing inside of urban centers where we could say that an attack in Islamabad, Lahore, Karachi, Peshawar is a possibility. There is no kind of credible threat that we can attach to the New Zealand cricket team. Do I feel that this was politically motivated? Completely. I do not think there was such a valid security threat that would cause the New Zealand cricket team to go to the stadium and play, to us and decide, no, we're going back to New Zealand. So we do have to understand, like I said in my introduction, Pakistan is going to see many challenges over the next 6 to 8 months, whose single and only will be to give Pakistan a black eye. New Zealand pulling out hours before the cricket match was to start is a big black eye for Pakistan. Whether Pakistan can find a way to recover from this, that is something very different. There was also a report issued, I believe it was by a UK agency, saying that what really happened is that at Dushanbe, the Prime Minister what we were, a message was forwarded to us that Imran Khan was confronted in Dushanbe, where he was told by the foreign minister of another country that we now know that all of the reports of what Pakistan is doing to help Afghanistan are actually just media reports, and Pakistan has done nothing at all to do anything to help the Afghani people. I think the first thing we have to understand is that everything that Pakistan has done is open in front of the entire world. From helping people evacuate out of Afghanistan to providing aid and food to the people in Afghanistan, it's in front of everyone. But this is another screw that's going to be turned against Pakistan. That if we cannot get you pressurized by the terrorism angle, if we cannot bring pressure on you in the economic side, if we cannot politically bring it on you, then we'll just bring on what they call bad PR. That everything Pakistan is saying is not true. And Pakistan's statements, if we talk about terrorism tomorrow, if we talk about building Pakistan and growing Pakistan and helping Afghanistan become more stable, people won't listen to us. So there is a very interesting little game going on against Pakistan, both hybrid and on the ground. So we need this point. Pakistan, and we have the possibility of the entire country so heavily, so that we won't be able to do anything or move anywhere or find any kind of help. Now, these are all well thought out games. Pakistan has been long the target of the Western world because we have nuclear weapons and we are a threat to India. They do not want Pakistan stable. And with Afghanistan becoming unstable, they have an opportunity to destabilize Pakistan to the point where they create an excuse to attack Pakistan.
Right. So basically what you're saying is that the New Zealand's decision to move out of the tour, it was politically motivated and there was no credible threat. And also you're saying that there are a number of factors at play here at this moment. So now let's talk about Taliban's rivalry with ISKP and how do you see it turning out in the future?
Well, I think the rivalry itself is media hype. ISKP isn't anywhere close enough, strong enough to be able to fight the Taliban. We also have to understand that the Taliban is an indigenous own and build and earn their support from inside of Afghanistan. ISKP was imported into Afghanistan by people who don't want to see Afghanistan stable. They were given support and shelter by Afghanistan's intelligence services, much like the TTP was. They were allowed to arm and grow and build safe havens for themselves in Nuristan and Nangarhar. If ISKP was actually a threat to the Afghans, I think the Afghan army would have taken them on first because they're a much smaller force as compared to the 60,000, 70,000 that the Taliban of Afghanistan to recruit because they are not an indigenous group. Their leadership has been brought in from the ISKP team that has come into Afghanistan, made it their first goal to take part in members of the TTP, the Lashkar-e Jangvi, and bring them into their own groups. Once they were brought in, now you and I both know that a terrorist who is inspired by an ideology of one leader cannot easily change the way they think to be inspired by another leader. So what we really see with ISKP inside of Afghanistan is a melting pot of unhappy terrorists. And handling them, whether it be for the United States military, whether it be for Pakistan, whether it be for the Afghanis, whether it be for the Taliban, will not take a lot of work. You are talking about two provinces inside of Afghanistan and two small centers inside of Afghanistan that are considered to be the hot points of being where these people can actually find their fight from. But they will not be able to find any success. That is the understanding. That is the understanding that we have, is that ISKP does not have the strength inside of Afghanistan to stand up to much less the Taliban, much less anyone else. Now, the rivalry that goes on, yes, ISKP does have dreams of being the next Al Qaeda or Al Qaeda 2.0. To do that, they need to pull people from the Taliban. They need to pull supporters and financiers from the Taliban. They are not able to do that because the Taliban has now taken Afghanistan again. Had the Taliban not had such easy success in taking Afghanistan, the fight between the two would have been much, much harder. But since the Taliban has had little to no resistance in taking over Afghanistan again after the US started their withdrawal, ISKP has literally put a bullet in their own heads. They will take on the suicide bombing attack like they had at Kabul airport, which interestingly enough, the gentleman was 6 years ago arrested in Delhi. We believe he was in raw custody. We believe he was with the Indians. It's very interesting that he carried out the attack. A lot of fingers are now going to start connecting. Hands are going to start to join. And we're going to see a lot of the things that over the past 10 years that we have been talking about India's opportunities, India's operations, and India's kinetic abilities inside of Afghanistan. We will see them start taking more shape. We will see them looking to carry out more outstanding, spectacular attacks. But as long as the Taliban is in power, those kinds of attacks will be impossible in Afghanistan. And we ourselves don't believe that ISKP will last more than 4 months inside the Afghanistan soil.
Right. So you were saying that Taliban is much more powerful this time, so ISKP does not have a future in Afghanistan at the moment. Okay. Let's also talk about Al Qaeda, because there have been some reports that Al Qaeda could re-emerge in the next 1 year in Afghanistan, and they could possibly carry out an attack on the US. What do you have to say about this?
I disagree. Al Qaeda has now moved to Northern Africa. They have built their base. They are fully training there. Yes, there are some Al Qaeda remnants still in Afghanistan that hold some loyalty to the Taliban. There are a lot of rumors that some of the Al Qaeda leadership is still in Afghanistan. Hamza bin Laden was killed in Afghanistan, I think about a week, 10 days ago. So there are a lot of rumors being used to connect pieces without having the facts. I don't see Afghanistan being a problem for the United States. At that point, did not want a war with the U.S. We don't believe that Al Qaeda 1.0, Al Qaeda 2.0, Al Qaeda 3.0 are going to be a threat, because now Al Qaeda has the problem of ISIS around the world. Their attacks are much quicker. They are without planning. They are looking to make a quick hit as fast as possible and carry out as many casualties as they possibly can. Al Qaeda is more of a thought-out, well-planned operation where they are looking to carry out these spectacular attacks. If they're not able to do that, they won't carry out the attack. Now, the possibility of the U.S. being attacked from Afghan soil, as many of the media reports are coming out, to the possibility that 1 year from now, Afghanistan could become the epicenter and a U.S. attack could be carried out there. I think that is a lot of wishful thinking. I think it is ground building for potential re-entry of the CIA or a JSOC force to come back into Afghanistan, doing targeted assassinations, cleaning up some of the mess that they left behind. The possibility of an attack is very, very small. Al Qaeda does not have that capability anymore. We have not heard Al Qaeda carry out a major attack in the past 2 years. We have heard ISIS carry them out. So the bigger fear that the U.S. needs to have is of the ISIS threat, wherever it's centered. The problem that they need to consider is Iraq, Syria. Afghanistan is a secondary problem. It is more of a domestic issue for Afghans. It is not an international issue that the U.S. is concerned about.
Right. So basically you are saying that Al Qaeda is not going to be that much of a threat now, but ISIS is much stronger than before. And now let's talk about threat of TTP for Pakistan. In the beginning of this session, I just quoted some stats about the Pakistan Armed Forces in the recent, just the last 2 months. And how do you see the security situation for Pakistan? It's going to get worse, or TTP has become stronger than before? after the rise of Taliban in Afghanistan? What do you say?
Well, I think we're giving the TTP too much credit. To be very honest, having dealt with the TTP, I think we're giving them way too much credit. Back in 2007, 2008, 2009, all the way up to 2013, the TTP was a powerhouse. They were a real threat for us. They were able to draw people in, talk them through, carry out attacks that were spectacular. Not only spectacular, but they were also attacks that would cause a lot of fear among the people. So there are many things that we need to wash out of our memory from way back then to today. The TTP has been, with not being impolite, but they have been torn apart. The Operation Zarb-e-Azab did a lot of damage to their capabilities. The fact that the Pakistan Army has not hesitated, not even once, in cross-border shelling into Afghanistan, wherever we have known there is a TTP camp, wherever we have known there is a TTP training center, we have gone after them. So we have not let them grow back or get back any kind of strength. What we saw in Balochistan, the attack on the Serena Hotel, on the Chinese diplomats, the attack in Dasu, these were the kind of attack that a small militant group that has very little power will carry out to get someone's attention and make you think that they have the ability to carry out a spectacular attack. In terms of Pakistan, you have to understand that we will now be a very big target for RAW. We will be a very big target for the CIA. We'll be a very big target for Mossad. These three organizations have in the past supported that same TTP. We cannot close our eyes. We cannot pretend like nothing is what is really happening. The problem that we have is that we tend to think, well, the attack happened, it's the intelligence service's fault. It's the military's fault. We forget the fact that these people are living in our communities. They are going to our mosques. They are praying there. They are trying to recruit there. They're trying to convert people there. And we are not paying attention to them. Now, at some point, we have to realize that you don't get a ripple in the ocean until you throw a pebble. And the TTP is currently throwing pebbles, not only from a guerrilla warfare point of view, but from a political point of view in terms of their clean response to Shah Mahmood Qureshi when he said, we will offer you amnesty. The TTP's response to them was, we will accept your amnesty when you give us Sharia in Fatah. Now, we know what Sharia they're talking about. We saw it in Swat. And we're not interested in offering them Sharia in return for the release of all of their fighters from the jails, from the prisons, to give them the power that they are lacking right now. Their planners are not in their hands. Their strategists are not in their hands. They are counting on splinter groups joining back. They're counting on other groups to give them leadership, to give them capabilities. Joining hands with the Baloch Liberation Army was another show of literally how weak the TTP has become. In the past, you remember TTP attacks were blamed solely and wholly by the TTP. Now, there are coordinated attacks. BLA with TTP, BRA with TTP. Up in the north, they went after, with ETIM, they went after Dasu. The TTP does not have the teeth to come after Pakistan right now. We have closed all their doors, we have closed all their opportunities, and we have shut them down as a terrorist. The problem they have with us right now is they need to find a way into Pakistan. They need to create fear among the Pakistanis. Whether it be attacks on our security forces, whether it be attacks on our law enforcement forces, we cannot take this as pressure from a weakened, unstable, disunified terror group. Because if you look at the TTP structure, they are hoping that the splinter groups will come back and join. The splinter groups will bring their leadership. The splinter groups will bring their capabilities. What they're forgetting is on the other side, where you used to enjoy safe haven in Afghanistan, that safe haven is gone. The Taliban will be directly targeting you. We have been told clearly that the TTP will no longer exist in Afghanistan. There cannot be a more clear statement made to us than that. And that was given to us by our sources inside of Afghanistan, inside of the Taliban. So you have to understand No one is interested in the TTP continuing to exist, and no one is interested in them continuing it to launch tests inside of Pakistan. But we cannot expect things to happen overnight. We cannot expect, like the Americans are expecting, the girls' schools will be opened immediately. All these facilities will be offered immediately because you weren't able to do it in 20 years. You cannot expect the Taliban to deliver in 20 days. The fight against the TTP is a coordinated fight between the Pakistan Army and the Taliban. That fight will only be won when we can all work together and understand this is a combined enemy. This is not just a threat to Pakistan, but it's also a threat to Afghanistan. And when that understanding is clear, wiping out these foreign militants, wiping out these sponsored terror groups, wiping out these proxy groups becomes extremely easy. But we have to get to that understanding.
Right. So you're saying that Pakistan now will be a very big target for RAW, for CIA, and for Mossad. But as you see it, you are saying that TTP is not as big a threat as we consider it to be because it has become unstable and disorganized. Then the question may arise that who is carrying out the recent terrorist activities in Pakistan? I think you said that TTP is collaborating with other terrorist groups and is not launching these activities independently. This is what you're saying?
Yes, they are. See, now look, we need to divide this a little bit. In the past, RAW has used the TTP against us as a militant guerrilla force. Now, RAW has Pashtun Tahfuz movement. They have now created the National Democratic Movement, which today joined hands again with PTM and said this: we will cancel our rally, which was a political rally, to join you in your rally to demand the freedom of Ali Wazir. Now, you're a freshly launched political party. You're going to bat for an for a non-state actor who has regularly pushed an anti-state agenda against Pakistan. You're bringing these people on the stage with you, and you're still telling us that we have nothing to do with these organizations. Here's where my problem comes in. When you talk about warfare, you cannot talk about warfare from just guns and bullets. You have to talk about warfare from the psychological point of view. Now, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, Manzoor Pashtun was turned into a rock star. He was on BBC, he was on every program around the world talking about the Pashtun Tahfuz movement. Now, slowly, as he became more famous, their narrative started to change. It became very anti-army. It became very anti-military. It became very anti-Pakistan. And they got support from across the border. Amirullah Saleh tweeted in their behalf. There are many pictures of Mohsen Dawar and Ali Wazir meeting senior Afghani military officials, senior Afghan government officials. Ashraf Ghani even tweeted in their favor. Now, when you start seeing foreign leaders tweeting in favor of a political movement, which isn't really a political movement, which isn't really an activist movement, and they are getting more support from them. And most of the problems that they had with the Pakistan army were because the army had arrested, suspected, or known TTP terrorists, and it was PTM that went and protested at the police stations, at the army checkposts, at the army bases for the release of those terrorists. So the model has now changed. We have gone back to ethnic, linguistic warfare, where you will try to divide the Pathans and Punjabis, the Sindhis and the Balochis and the Pathans, and you will try and create a civil war type situation in Pakistan this way. Because guerrilla warfare will not work for you. The Pakistan army has learned the model. What I was saying was that we have to understand that now Pakistan is no longer guerrilla warfare.
Yes.
The Pakistan army has understood the model, has broken the model, has understood how to break the model if it ever lifts its head again. But RAW being very forward-thinking, understanding what they've done inside of India to cause disharmony, disunity, they're going to use the same model inside of Pakistan. So we will see a PTM take strength. We will see a Sindhi group taking strength. We will see a Balochi group taking strength. We will see a far-right Punjabi group taking strength. And all of a sudden, voices will become very hostile. Once the voices it becomes very difficult for Pakistan as a nation to stand up to all the threats. Because inside of Pakistan, we have a very bad habit of passing stories around, passing news around, without verifying or understanding whether this is true or not. Much like the story that was passed around last night, Pakistan is under a major cyber attack, and all of Pakistan's internet is down. This morning, PTA proved to us, confirmed for us, that there was no such attack. But the rumor mill is very hot in Pakistan. We are going to see a lot of rumors, a lot of articles reading that are very negative. They will give a lot of voice to people that don't really have a voice, that don't really have the strength or the ability to get their voice out, much like we saw with Mansoor Kashmir.
Right. So what I get from you is that India will now support different ethnic groups in Pakistan, like PTM, and there will be a lot more circulation of negative news about Pakistan, like we heard yesterday of attack on the internet. Right. So what is the the crux of the matter? What is the solution for this? If we want the security situation in Pakistan to stabilize, what role are government, our security institutions, what role do they have to play?
Well, we need to understand a couple of things here. For Pakistan to have a stable security situation, that means that Afghanistan must be stable first. Because as long as Afghanistan is unstable, as long as there's unrest in Afghanistan, Pakistan will not see stability. The reason I say that is when you have instability in Afghanistan, you will have a rush of refugees coming into Pakistan, which will destabilize us automatically. Number one. Number two, from a security point of view, what the Pakistan Army has been doing thus far are intelligence-based operations, very, very small kinetic operations in secured areas, blocked off areas where they are able to take on the terrorists and beat them at their own game. What we have to understand is that instead of screaming for the all-out war, which we saw yesterday from a lot of people talking about when the amnesty was discussed, that a lot of people said that Pakistan should go to all-out war with the TTP. Now, I would like to remind those people that could you please go back and look at what happened in 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, when Pakistan was in an all-out war situation with the TTP. Every city in Pakistan was bombed. We lost 80,000 innocent souls and billions and billions of dollars. Not to mention what has been done to Pakistan's image, what has been done to Pakistan's reputation, the success of Operation Zarb-e-Azb, the success of Rahi-Ras were all things that our enemies would have never wanted. And that only became successful because the military removed themselves from the political conversation. And they said that our solution is by beating these enemies. Now, whether the country stood with us at that point or not when we launched our operations against terrorists, yes, there was an uptick in attacks then as well. But we were able to bring those attacks, one, under control, two, shut them down, and three, make them non-existent. Yes, there are attacks in the FATA area. Those attacks have never stopped. They are just not made public because of the concern, the fear, the problems that are created by these things being brought into the news. For example, 2 days ago in Mardan, a police officer was shot standing in a choke. The TTP immediately claimed it. That was the first attack inside of an urban center, according to media representatives. That is not really an attack inside of an urban center. In Swat, regular attacks have been happening. There was a major attack at Kanju Airport where 3 terrorists were killed, which led to finding many, many depots of TTP fighters inside of Swat. So when I'm talking to you from this point of view, I'm saying that we have got to understand that this fight is nowhere from being over. Nowhere from being over. But we have won this before. We will win it again. But when we start focusing on changing the ideology, the mentality, the argument that people are brainwashed with, then we'll actually win this war once and for all. We still have not gotten to that point. We are still fighting the kinetic operations. We are still fighting the terror attack. We are still fighting guerrilla warfare. We have not gotten to fighting the ideological warfare that gives us actual security in this region.
Right. So this war can only be won if we are also going to fight it on the ideological front. Khalid, I would like to ask you another question. Was it a good move at the part of the government of Pakistan to offer amnesty to TTP? Is it going to send a wrong message?
I think this was the most foolish move that the government could have made, offering any kind of amnesty to the TTP. Amnesty conversations are taken into account once you have defeated a force. They have laid down their weapons. They have said, we will not fight you anymore. Then you talk about amnesty at different levels. You do not talk about blanket amnesty. Someone who has been responsible for killing 132 children in Peshawar should not be given blanket amnesty. That's just not fair. What you have to understand that the government of Pakistan has done peace deals many, many times, from Musharraf all the way up until Zardari. We have made peace deals with the TTP, and those peace deals have been categorically and regularly broken, because it shows to them that we had to beg, we had to ask that please stop fighting. Because to them, it's not that, okay, listen, we don't want to fight anymore, so can we stop fighting? This is how we made the government bow to us. Now, if you remember Naik Mohammed, back in, I think it was 2006, 2007, the government of Pakistan made a peace deal with him, saying that we will not bomb you. Naik Mohammed turned around to his own tribal people and said, look, I made the government bow before me. I made the military of Pakistan bow before me. They blew him up the next day. Now, we have to remember these things. History is replete with people making peace deals and those peace deals falling apart. And when those peace deals fall apart, it goes back to a much more significant level of violence. Every time the TTP has made a peace deal with the government of Pakistan and walked away from that peace deal, it has turned into bloody violence. Bloody violence afterwards. Whether it was splinter groups they created and said, oh, it's not us, it's Jamaat al-Ahrar, it's Jamaat this, it's Jamaat that. They have found a model that works for them. Hands off their mistake, and someone else is responsible for it. What we have to understand is that when you even make the offer of amnesty, it looks like we have weakness, that we cannot fight these guys. And we have beaten these people. Now, when we've beaten these people, how can you expect that we offer them amnesty again? This is a mistake. This will be bad for Pakistan. Period. End of story. And there is no way out of this. If you were to give amnesty to these people, you will find nothing but more bloodshed and more violence.
Right. I have now received a question from the Twitter handle is Shikari, and he's asking, why cannot we conduct all the anti-terrorist operations beyond the border of Pakistan?
By beyond the border of Pakistan, do you mean in Afghanistan?
Yes, he is not mentioned, but I think because today we are talking about Afghanistan, he's referring to Afghanistan here.
Okay, first of all, you have to understand international law says that if we cross an international border and drop one bomb without the government of Afghanistan permission, that is an act of war. Whether we are hitting terrorist camps, whether we're hitting arms depots, whether we're hitting command centers, once the Pakistan Army, the Pakistan Air Force crosses the Afghan border with the intent to fire a bullet, fire a bomb, or bomb inside of Afghanistan, we have committed an act of war. That changes the entire level of the conversation. What is happening right now is that we are sitting on our side of the border and firing into Afghanistan. Where we know the camps are, where we know that their depots are, where we know their command is sitting, we are firing across into them. Because Afghanistan cannot give us permission. They cannot give us permission to send the Pakistan Army into Afghanistan to clean up Afghanistan. Number one, that's not our job. Our job is defending Pakistan, not going into Afghanistan and cleaning that up. That is the Afghan job. That is what that government was there for. That is what the United States was there for. That is where all of this has to happen. We can only do so much. And the only so much that we can do is firing across the border and begging and pleading the Afghan government to please, for God's sakes, eliminate these cells. Eliminate these terror groups so that you can also have peace and we can also have peace.
Right. Now I want to talk about Maulana Abdul Aziz of the Lal Masjid, because today we are talking about the security situation in Pakistan, and I consider his actions a threat to the security of Pakistan. Basically, there is a video clip circulating where he's speaking to the Islamabad police, and he's inciting them to abandon the force, and he's threatening them with consequences. How do you see this?
That's what he did in 2007 as well. I mean, if you remember, he would take police officers hostage, make them swear upon Allah, that swear upon the Quran, that you will not do anything that's immoral, you will not take bribes, you will not do this, you will not do this. They shut down CD shops in Apara. They shut down barber shops in Apara. They have no other option than creating fear. Now, I agree with you that Maulana Abdul Aziz is a threat to Pakistan. I agree with you wholeheartedly on this. What I don't understand is why he hasn't been taken care of yet. And that is where my question comes from. I saw the pictures and the videos coming through on Telegram groups, on our intelligence groups, and then on Twitter as well. What you are literally doing is you are giving every enemy of Pakistan the ability to stand up, point a finger at us and go, see, you didn't solve the problem. See, you didn't solve the problem. And that will turn into a point and speak right now, and down the road it will turn into a stick being beaten on our heads. Now, again, I have to go back to that statement I made earlier. The only way we can win this war is beating the ideology. Maulana Abdul Aziz is the number one reason of that ideology still existing. Because Lal Masjid teaches a very, very hostile form of Islam. He is fully aware of what terror groups do. He is fully involved with terror groups. And at the end of the day, it is a black eye for Pakistan. And that black eye for Pakistan is something that we cannot get rid of very easily. We spent, I believe it was 3, 4, 5, 6 months back in the summer of 2007 when Lal Masjid was under occupation. And I will say it that way. That when Lal Masjid was under occupation, that is when we saw what they were really capable of. If that starts again with Afghanistan unstable, and with the situation in Afghanistan as hot as it is, we cannot afford to play with Lal Masjid in Pakistan. That would just create another major issue for us.
Very true. Law enforcement agencies of Pakistan and our military establishment should take care of this issue. I would just like you to give the concluding remarks about how we can, Pakistan can better cope with this deteriorating security situation.
As I've said, we have to understand that Pakistan is under all kinds of threats right now. We need to get out of the mindset that there is a military solution to this.
Okay, I also received a question from Shikari, and he's saying that how can Pakistan win the war of narrative, that we are not being truthful?
Well, now, the war of narratives requires a lot more planning than what we've done so far. Pakistan, we need to understand that to win the war of narratives, we need to have a strategy to actually win the war of narratives. We have spent our time fighting with each other, trying to prove that this person is right and that person is wrong. What we need is a department, whether it's inside the military, whether it's inside of NACTA, whether it's inside the Ministry of Information, whose sole responsibility is managing the narrative. So they will build a strategy for military responses. They will build a strategy for economic responses. They will build a strategy for diplomatic responses. And then they will find people that actually know how to talk, which is very key here. Asking everyone in the world to defend Pakistan's narrative is foolish. You need to find people that are smart, number one, that know how to speak, number two, Number three, that have logic in their head so they don't get excited all of a sudden and get into a yelling match with someone because they disagree. You also need to have someone that can write what needs to be said. These are the points from the government's point of view. These are the things the government needs to achieve. These are the ways we are going to get this out into the main conversation. What you've seen is, and if we use just our neighbors as an example, India to one side, Afghanistan to the other. Afghanistan has done a very, very good job in taking key voices and planting inside of them a narrative that this is Pakistan's fault. Pakistan did this to us. They've gotten that message out to people. No matter how much Pakistan tries to help, no matter how much Pakistan does, it's Pakistan's fault, number one. On the Indian side, our ISI is so powerful that we're able to train pigeons to be espionage officers. We are able to put bombs inside of cows and send them into India. Somehow we're able to move our navy into the Panjshir Valley where there is no water. Somehow a British F-16 was marked as a Pakistani F-16 and put on TV around the world that Pakistan is helping the Taliban in the Panjshir Valley. These are all lies. Hands down, A to Z, all lies. But we don't have the voices, the people, or the credibility to counter these narratives because we have not built these three things inside of Pakistan. We have given a lot of room and a lot of place to people who want to talk, who want to defend, who want to build the image of Pakistan. But there is no one who is responsible for building the narrative that these people will follow. Command 11 for one point of view. If you go through our website, if you go through our tweets, you'll find that we follow very, very clear talking points. Those talking points are generated inside of Command 11 based on research, not on opinion, based on research, with evidence, with fact, so that we can talk intelligently. That's missing from the government of Pakistan's conversation. Without those things, we cannot win the war of narratives. Now, the war of narratives to one side, the war against terrorism to the other side, and security situation to the other. Which fire do we put out first? Because if a terrorist attack hits, then we don't have our war of narratives right. If a security issue arises, we don't have our war of narratives right. Which fire do you put out first? Which war do you go to? What is more important for Pakistan? No one is sitting and defining these things. Our hope, our belief at Command 11 is that either a group of think tanks will get together and start to drive this, a group of individuals will get together and start to drive this, or the government will wake up and start to drive this. Because these crossfire, scatter fire statements coming across, they try and paint an image of Pakistan that is literally countered within 30 seconds by every little bunch sitting on Twitter. Now, that doesn't win our battle. It doesn't win us international points. It does not help our narrative. It does not help Pakistan achieve any goals in terms of any dossier that we may put out. We need to get our feet back on the ground. That starts with understanding where we need to fight. The first fight is on TV and online. The second fight is in the masjids and in the madrasas. The third fight is on the ground in Fatah, Balochistan, Punjab, and Afghanistan. Until we understand this and develop a strategy that encompasses all of these things, we cannot find success. If you remember Zarbe Azab, Asif Ghafoor was our DG ISBR. Did you see how he controlled the mic? Did you see how he controlled the narrative? We need the same thing from Babar Iftikhar. That he needs to control this narrative, he needs to put those statements out there, so all of the pro-Pakistani voices, all of the strong Pakistani voices can stand up and stand with our army and stand with the country and carry these conversations forward. Now be very clear, you cannot trust any federal minister, you cannot trust any politician, because at the end of the day, they are talking about a seat they hold. They are not talking about the actual security of this country. And we have seen for the past 20 years on television a literal goulash created of everyone's opinions and no platform being created for Pakistan to be able to put its narrative out across every single platform with success. We need to find that. I've been involved in a lot of these conversations over the past week about how we can fight the narrative war, how do we beat terrorism. First, we need to understand what we're capable of, how we're capable of it, what we can achieve, and how we need to do it. That needs to come out of ISPR. That needs to come out of the Ministry of Interior. That needs to come out of PEMRA. That needs to come out of those bodies that are responsible for these things. Until you have these things, you cannot win.
These are really good suggestions, and I hope that people in power corridors are listening and do something about it. Now we have a question from Farheen Hashmi, and she's saying, what types of tools are being designed in Pakistan that can effectively deliver the Pakistani narrative to the world?
Well, the best two tools that we have that weren't developed in Pakistan are Twitter and WordPress. As far as internal tools that are being developed, there's no way I can discuss those on an open conversation where we will actually give the enemy some kind of advantage. But yes, there are some tools being developed. We've achieved a lot of success with the tools that we put into play, and we are enhancing those more now to be able to achieve more things.
Right, and you mentioned General Asif Ghafoor. The truth is that all of the patriots on Twitter miss him a lot. Is there any way we can bring him back, or start a petition movement to bring him back? Because he was really very effective in countering the propaganda of the enemies.
Well, I think that's the beauty of the Pakistan Army. The foundation that was built by Asim Bajwa when he was DG ISPR was carried forward with a lot of strength and with a lot of understanding by Asif Ghafoor when he became our DG. I think Babar Iftikhar needs to also take a look at what was done by his predecessors. He's a very competent officer. He's a very intelligent officer. But one thing that we've always believed is that instead of that uniform standing up there and giving these briefings and giving these talks, put someone in a suit up there. Someone who's media friendly, someone who can engage and talk to and bring the media onto one page with you, much like it's done in foreign countries, where you have U.S. Pentagon spokespeople are civilians. They are not military officials. Yes, if there's a military campaign going on, there will be a uniformed officer that will stand there and tell you the details of the military operation, answer some questions, and then give the mic back to the civilian. Pakistan needs to implement this same point of view. And I say that for two reasons. Number one, that civilian is not governed and controlled by military rules, which means they can sit down with journalists, they can have casual conversations, they can float ideas, they can put things into thought that usually cannot be put out by someone in a uniform. One advantage. Number two, the relationship built between two civilians is very different than a uniform and a civilian. We all know that. So we have always told the Pakistan Army that we would like the Army in ISPR do not put the uniformed officer out there and put someone in a suit instead. Asif Ghafoor's success was being able to be relatable. That was the same success that Asim Bajwa had. He was very relatable. We need to get that back. And Babar Iftikhar is very capable of doing so. He's an outstanding officer. But he needs to understand that the Department of Inter-Services Public Relations has significantly changed because of the two officers that came before him. And those two officers set such a standard that he needs to build a team to be able to carry that standard forward.
Yes, I completely agree with you that General Asif Ghafoor was very relatable, and that is why people liked him a lot.
Right now, Pakistan is in a lot of trouble. I mean, I keep repeating this over and over. The nuclear assets of Pakistan are the key issue that Pakistan is a target for the rest of the world. Whether it be terrorists, whether it be extremists, whether it be our own enemies, other states. The reason Pakistan is a target is because of those nuclear weapons. Marching into Afghanistan, marching into Iraq was very easy because they just had a conventional army. Pakistan has nuclear weapons. that changes the game, that changes the discussion, and that makes this into a much, much more difficult thing to do. How long can Pakistan stand as a nuclear power? Allah willing, we will stand until the end of time. That is my personal position.
Inshallah. Inshallah.
There are many people who will try and find ways to either take our nuclear assets away, weaken our nuclear assets, or somehow make them ineffective. For example, India at one point started talking about that they would use nuclear as a first strike. Now, that really caused a lot of problems in Pakistan because we follow a gold star doctrine. First, conventional warfare. If conventional doesn't work, it gets completely out of control. Then we will look at a nuclear option. India said we will go nuclear first. Now, that's another way of trying to make Pakistan weaker. How long can we stand? That all depends on Allah Ta'ala. How long do we believe we can stand with the army of Pakistan, with the ISI of Pakistan, to the end of time? Because we, to this day, say if the ISI were to close its eyes just for 10 minutes on Pakistan's security situation, Pakistan would fall. There are so many countries, so many forces that want Pakistan to collapse. And all they need is an opportunity. Afghanistan is an opportunity for them. We need to understand that we need to take that opportunity out of their hands, put back a strong Afghanistan so it cannot be used against us or any other country in the world. That is what we need to do.
Thank you, Halat, for your valuable analysis. This brings us to the end of the session. It was very enlightening and hopefully very helpful also for the people and the policy making in the government. Thank you, everyone, and Allah Hafiz.